it's really coming down out there. So my New Year's resolution this year was to watch 365 films that I have never seen. And even though I didn't watch 31 films in January, I think I'm off to a pretty good start. I've seen a couple of other YouTubers making videos about what they watched during a certain month, so I decided to throw my hat in the ring. But to make things a little bit more spicy, I decided I'm going to rank them from the ones that I least enjoyed to what I most enjoyed. Something that you should know about me is that I have a really bad habit of buying movies that I think I'm going to be really interested in, and then they just end up sitting on the shelf, only to be admired but never watched. So in addition to my resolution, I decided to remedy that and just go through all the movies that I own but I have never seen. And over here I have my boutique Blu-ray shelf, and the first few rows are all Criterions, and I figured that'd be a good place to start. Not everything in this video is going to be a Criterion, and I did see some of these movies in theaters, but I thought that'd be a good jumping off point. And I did end up skipping around a lot. Maybe I wanted to watch a certain movie with somebody, or maybe I wasn't feeling a particular movie that day. And my ranking was determined by many factors, not just by the filmmaking, the craft, the acting, or what have you. A lot of it has to do with enjoyability, so you'll see maybe a terrible movie ranked above movies that are considered classics, but I don't know. Who's to say? Starting off with numbers 29 and 28, I swear I didn't do this on purpose, is the Criterion double pack of Drive, He Said, and A Safe Place. A Safe Place actually being the worst of the two. What's that? You've never heard of either of these movies? Don't worry, neither did I before I got this box set. About a year ago, I got this box set called America Lost and Found, the BBS story. And the main reason I got it is because Easy Rider and The Last Picture Show were included in this set, movies that I was really interested in watching. And for people who don't know what BBS is, BBS was one of the major studios in the late 60s, early 70s that was responsible for the start of the New Hollywood era. Basically, without these movies and movies like The Graduate, we wouldn't have movies like Eraserhead, Star Wars, The Godfather, like creator-driven movies of the 70s. Creator-driven movies of the 70s owe pretty much everything to BBS. And these were kind of the awkward middle children of the studio. A Safe Place was this awful movie about this quirky, suicidal girl who sees visions of Orson Welles as a magician and putting this guy's life through hell, even though she also struggles with her own demons, and she has these mood swings, and it's just not good. It's worth watching for Orson Welles as a magician and one of the early performances by Jack Nicholson. Actually, other than The Last Picture Show, Jack Nicholson was involved in every single one of these movies. So if you're a big Jack Nicholson fan, this is a must-get for your collection. But moving on to 28, speaking of Jack Nicholson, it's Drive, He Said, which doesn't have anything to do with cars, and it's actually more about basketball and equating getting drafted into a basketball team to the Vietnam War. It's not great either. It's worth it for Bruce Dern's performance, and it's the first film to be directed by Jack Nicholson, though he doesn't star in it. I was kind of excited to see it because Jack Nicholson directed it, but I should have known that if it was his big passion project, it was going to be about something boring like basketball. Not that basketball movies are all boring, but this one certainly was. I don't really have much else to say about either of these movies, so I'm going to put it back in the box set and move on. Number 27 is actually the most recent film that I saw in theaters, called Out of Darkness. My friend Tabor invited me to see a secret horror movie at AMC, and you don't know what the movie is until it starts. It's just this boring paranoia thriller about cavemen, and that's kind of it. They all get picked off one by one. It's like Caveman the Village with a little bit of the paranoia themes from The Thing put in there. Usually I don't care if a movie is derivative if they're doing something different, but the only thing different about it was they were cavemen, and I could see every single influence in this movie. What was even more bizarre to me is when I got home, I saw that it had like a 93% on Rotten Tomatoes. I usually don't trust Rotten Tomatoes, but in this case I was like, what did you critics see that I didn't? Maybe I should give it another watch. I'm not going to for the next couple of years, I don't think. But I don't really have anything else to say about that one either, so I'm gonna move on. Number 26 was another BBS film starring Bruce Dern and Jack Nicholson called The King of Marvin Gardens. Now to me, this movie's not necessarily bad, I just really wasn't invested. It's about these two brothers, one of them's involved in like a Ponzi scheme and he's trying to get Jack Nicholson in on it. It's worth it for the performances, but otherwise it's just not super enjoyable. It's got a pretty good performance by Ellen Burstyn in it that you would know from The Exorcist or maybe even last year's The Exorcist Believer.
My opinion, it's because I'm not a member of the damn patriarchy.
But now I'm talking about The Exorcist Believer and not The King of Marvin Gardens, so let's move on. Now this is the one that's going to be a little controversial. Number 25 is the movie Night Swim. This movie is awful. It might be the worst movie on this list. Well, no, I think A Safe Place is worse than this. But what this movie has going for it is that it's entertaining as fuck. I never saw a trailer for this. I only saw the billboards and the bus stop posters. And I figured, what is this movie about? A killer pool? And that's exactly what it is. It's about a killer swimming pool. And the movie is not clever at all. Within the first 20 minutes, there's several pool references that you'd think were kind of quirky or kind of funny, but no, you're supposed to take them seriously. And that made it all the more hilarious. I definitely recommend maybe seeing a matinee or a discounted price version of this because it is a good time despite how bad it is. Also, I feel kind of bad for Wyatt Russell. I think Wyatt Russell is actually a great actor and he doesn't do a terrible job in this, but he deserves a lot better material than this. And actually, so does Carrie Condon. A few years ago, she was in a movie called The Banshees of Inisherin, and she's legitimately great in that. So why is her follow-up Night Swim? For number 24, I have Five Easy Pieces, another BBS film starring Jack Nicholson. I realize a lot of these BBS movies are on the bottom half of my list, but I assure you, they're not that bad. This one's actually pretty good. It's got a great diner scene with Jack Nicholson trying to order eggs, or he's trying to order something on the menu with substitutions, and the waitress is kind of being nasty to him. And it's just this great cathartic scene, and that's the most memorable part about this movie. But I also kind of like the themes of somebody coming from a privileged family and not feeling or even wanting to live up to his potential. And that's something I could say about BBS as a whole. They're all producers that are sons of producers or directors, sons of people who are big in the industry that are trying to break out and make something new. And they did. They kind of defied their parentage that were making these dumb producer-led movies and gave power back to the filmmakers. That's kind of neat, and that's kind of exemplified perfectly in Five Easy Pieces. I could see myself revisiting this one and it'll end up higher on my list. Now for number 23, this might also be a controversial take, but hear me out. It's 1984's 1984. I liked this movie a lot, but it does feel like you need a working knowledge of the novel itself in order to enjoy the movie. John Hurt is great in this, and the cinematography by Roger Deakins is spectacular, but it does feel like a Cliff Notes version of the book, and if you just want to get an A on your test, just watch this movie. They don't change like anything. But it is worth seeing, like I said, because of the cinematography and John Hurt's performance. Number 22, I have Cheech and Chong's next movie. I watched this in preparation for the Pee-wee's Big Adventure review that I'm going to be doing, because this is the first on-screen appearance of Pee-wee Herman. But in addition to that, I just like Cheech and Chong. They're kind of a vibe. The movie feels kind of aimless and the plot's paper thin, but I don't know, it's just kind of cool to hang out with Cheech and Chong for an hour and a half. That's what this feels like. Number 21, I have Up in Smoke, the first Cheech and Chong movie. What's weird to me is that next movie, it's kind of a sequel. They're playing very similar characters and their names are Cheech and Chong. But in this one, they're playing Pedro and Man, but they're very distinctly and clearly just the Cheech and Chong characters. This one is a little bit better than next movie, but it has a lot of the same issues where it's aimless and a little plotless. This one does have more of a plot, but it is just kind of it's a skeleton to hang jokes off of. It is really enjoyable just because you're hanging out with Cheech and Chong the whole time. And it is kind of cool to see 1970s Los Angeles through the lens of Cheech and Chong. I also really love this box set. It looks like a weed stash box. And opens up, there's the movie. But something that I really, really appreciate about this is that it says on the cover that there's a poster in here. And I'm a sucker for posters. I mean, like, look, this entire house is covered in posters. I can't hang this poster up. Not because it's inappropriate. I have a Caligula poster hanging over there. But because they made it out of, like, weed joint paper. I mean, that's funny. It's just, if I put, like, a white or a black background behind this, it'll show up, but I really don't know if I can hang this. It's also really small, but it's really funny. I like that it's made out of that material. I don't know. Even though it's completely worthless, it was well worth the money for whatever that's worth. Okay, number 20, I have David Fincher's The Curious Case of Benjamin Button. I know, a lot of my friends told me, wait, you haven't seen that movie? In 2008, I was moving from Wisconsin to California, and it was a really hectic time. I finally, I think last year, decided to pick up the Criterion because it's really funny. Now, most other Criterions come in like this clear case, and the artwork fills up the entire case. Some of them are in like a digibook format, but this one is the only Criterion to come in like one of those standard blue Blu-ray cases. Now, I'm one of those idiot collectors that really cares about slipcovers because I like reversible art and that kind of fun stuff. But for this one, I needed the slipcover so it would like blend in better on my Criterion shelf. But look at me, I'm talking about the packaging and I'm not really talking about the movie itself. The movie itself is fine. It's not my favorite David Fincher movie. It reminded me a lot of Forrest Gump, The Notebook of all things, and The Princess Bride. And I felt like a lot of the characters were a little shallow, more shallow than Forrest Gump actually. And I like Forrest Gump. The real stars of the movie are the makeup effects, which still look really good to this day. However, the VFX don't hold up so well. They look a lot like Jeff Bridges in Tron, or like Grand Moff Tarkin in Rogue One. They hadn't quite perfected it yet, but I can forgive it because this movie was in 2008. It was one of the first movies to really try to do that, and it looks fine for the most part, but it does end up in the uncanny valley most of the time. I could see myself giving it another watch and maybe liking it a little bit more, but that's where I'm at right now. And for number 19, I have Easy Rider, which I didn't know until I watched the movie was directed by Dennis Hopper. Hopper also stars in the film alongside Peter Fonda and Jack Nicholson. It is kind of cool that their names are Wyatt and Billy, which is an obvious nod to Billy the Kid and Wyatt Earp, because they're like outlaws, man. The movie wasn't really my cup of tea, but I really liked vibing with the visuals and I really liked the performances. And if you couldn't already tell by the packaging, this is another one of the BBS titles. This one is actually available on its own if you want to just get Easy Rider, but I decided to get it as part of the pack. I know the word vibes is getting overused and misused a lot recently, but I don't know what other word to use to describe Easy Rider. That's just what it is. I also appreciated that it subverted my expectations. I thought it was gonna be one of those lame biker movies where they're just so cool and they're gonna get in a lot of rough and tough fights, and that's really not what this is. You just kind of see them going across Americana, meeting some cool and colorful characters, and exposing about life and philosophies, and I liked that about the movie. It was the motorcycle stuff that I'm like, I could take it or leave it, but then you don't have Easy Rider. Also, if you only know Dennis Hopper from things like Waterworld or the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 or Super Mario Brothers, then I suggest you check out Easy Rider, or hell, check out Blue Velvet, because he's a great performer and I think he deserves more credit than his later roles give him. Now at number 18, I have Stanley Kubrick's Barry Lyndon. This is one that I've been wanting to watch for a couple of years, and it's been in my collection for about that long. But the 3-hour runtime was incredibly daunting, and I didn't recognize any of the names here. I only knew who Stanley Kubrick was, and I heard that it was a really great movie, but there just wasn't a whole lot to get me like, yeah, let's watch Barry Lyndon. But I finally decided to hunker down, carve 4 hours out of my day just so I could sit back, make some popcorn, and finally watch Barry Lyndon. And I'm so glad that I finally did, because this movie is beautiful. It looks incredible. It's obviously a Kubrick movie because it's so meticulous. I hate Barry Lyndon himself, but I think you're supposed to. This guy is a complete asshole, and he just kind of stumbles into things and he gets rewarded and things taken away from him. And I think that's why this movie is lower on my list, because I don't like the protagonist. But again, I think it's intentional. I think the point of the movie is, look at this dorka doofus who's just stumbling through life, and don't you want to watch a movie about a guy who doesn't deserve a movie? That's exactly what this movie was, and I appreciated it more than I liked it, but I loved watching it. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. This is one of the movies, though, that I want to dive in deep with all of the bonus features that are included on the Criterion, and it's one of the 2-disc ones, so it means there's going to be a ton of cool stuff on here. Now, number 17, I don't actually own yet, but I saw at the New Beverly Cinema, the Quentin Tarantino's theater in Hollywood, and that was In the Mood for Love by Wong Kar-wai. This is another movie like Barry Lyndon where I appreciated it more than I loved it, but I do think a lot of that had to do with my experience at the New Bev. I love the New Bev, do not get me wrong. I frequent that place, or I try to frequent that place as much as I can now, but the seats are like this. There's not like an incline, so they're more like this. And I was stuck behind this guy whose head was so massive and I had to go around like this to try to read the subtitles because the movie's in Chinese. So I don't know if that affected my experience. I'm sure it did, because from what I watched of the movie when I was finally like in the groove of, I'm kind of doing this subconsciously now, I really did like it. It was like this funny yet sad look at people who found out that their significant others were cheating on them, and they're kind of reenacting it to see how it happened, and they accidentally fall in love with each other. And it's tragic and it's funny. Everything is purposeful. It's like a Kubrick movie where every shot has a purpose, every performance has a purpose. And the more that I'm talking about it, the more I think I really loved it. I want to get the Wong Kar-wai box set because it includes it, and I can watch it at home and really dive in deep and sink my teeth into it, and I think that'd be really cool. However, the Criterion box set always sells out, especially during sales, because it's like a $200 box set. From what I understand, it's worth it, but I don't always have $200 on hand. And when I do have $100 and it's during a sale, it's always sold out. I'm gonna leave this movie with this. I have this horrible joke where somebody says Wong Kar-wai, and I say Wong Kar because I've had exactly one chance to use it, and the person I told it to did not laugh. So at number 16 on my list, I have Arsenic and Old Lace, a Frank Capra movie. I thought this movie was incredibly charming, and it was super obvious that it was based on a stage play because of the way that it was performed, the way that it was written. It was very stagey, but I'm really not one of those people that cares that much about that. If it was made on stage, I kind of want it to be as stagey as possible, or else I want it to be really extravagant and big. Usually I think about like musicals when I think about that. Like The Producers movie, I love how stagey that looks. Or like Rent, I like how they kind of took it in a different direction. I also really love Cary Grant. Cary Grant is one of my favorite old school actors. My favorite movie of his would probably be North by Northwest, the Alfred Hitchcock film. But he carries this movie. He is so funny, and all the performances are so funny. And the plot doesn't make a whole lot of sense. It makes theater sense. It makes sense if you walked into an auditorium and saw actors on stage. It makes sense in that sort of way. I really enjoyed it, and I can't wait to show it to other people because it's one of those movies that was made in the 40s that still holds up with the comedy. The comedy, it's not like based on a time period. It's not based off of like pop culture reference. Well, some of them are, but the pop culture references have kind of aged well. The biggest one is there's a character who's constantly being compared to Boris Karloff, and luckily Boris Karloff is one of those actors who transcended time. Everybody knows who Boris Karloff is, and they are referring to him looking like Frankenstein. This movie, I don't know, I can't sing the praises of it enough. It is awesome. It is well worth getting the Criterion of it, and I think it comes with a radio adaptation of it, which is also pretty cool. Maybe I'll check that one out one day. Now at number 15, I have the Italian film Bicycle Thieves. This is another movie that I watched in preparation for my Pee-wee's Big Adventure video because it was said that Pee-wee's Big Adventure is kind of a pastiche or a parody of Bicycle Thieves. I'll get more into that when I talk about Pee-wee's Big Adventure in its own dedicated video, but divorced from all that, just watching Bicycle Thieves as a movie, this is one of the best movies I've ever seen. This is part of the Italian neorealism era. It's really funny, but it's also really sad, and it ends on a really sad note, and it's very Italian. If you've ever seen a giallo like Suspiria or Deep Red, and the movie just kind of wraps up and there's not like an epilogue and it's not really a happy ending, Italians just kind of do that. And that's really prevalent here in Bicycle Thieves. I think if I were to choose another country other than the United States that makes like the best movies, I think it might be Italy. I love Italian movies, specifically giallos, but Bicycle Thieves is a movie that I'm definitely going to revisit. I love the lead performance in this. The child actor is really good, and just the story is so simple. He's this poor man in post-World War II who needs to make money for his family, and the only way that he could do that is if he has his bicycle and it gets stolen. And the majority of the movie is him trying to find it again, which does sound a lot like Pee-wee's Big Adventure, but again, I'll talk more about that when I talk about Pee-wee. This movie, you'd think his bike gets stolen. How quirky. No, it is devastating. You just want him to succeed. You want him to get his bike back because it's not really his fault. I don't know what else to say. It's beautiful, and you should definitely check it out. Now, number 14 is another BBS film, Head. I knew nothing about Head. The only thing that I knew, because I read the back, was it featured the monkeys. And doing my research, this was supposed to be kind of the swan song or the final episode of the Monkees TV show. And if you don't know who the Monkees are, don't worry, I didn't really know either. The only thing I knew about them is they were kind of like Spinal Tap before Spinal Tap, but they were more of a parody of the Beatles. And the Monkees show was at least in part inspired by A Hard Day's Night. I know the producers were saying they wanted to make A Hard Day's Night for syndicated TV, and that's kind of exactly what it is now that I've done a little bit more research. And it's this incredibly manufactured show. And when they decided they wanted to make a movie, they were like, well, we're kind of done with that whole consumerism manufacture bullshit. And that might be why Head didn't succeed at first, because it's not what you would expect from a movie starring the Monkees. It's not family friendly. It's a parody of consumerism and being trapped in a box. Literally at the end of the movie, they get trapped back in the black box, which is supposed to be a symbol for them being trapped in the TV set. But the movie is also anti-war. It's one of the first, it might be the first anti-Vietnam movie, which I think is kind of cool. And the Monkees are just super enjoyable to watch, and you could tell that they were really trying to shake off that family-friendly, dorky, we're kind of like the Beatles vibe, because their music is great in this, their performances are over the top, but like in a fun way. The scene that sticks out in my head is Mickey Dolenz is in the desert, and he's trying to get into a Coke machine, and he goes into a tank and he blows it up, which is a very obvious on-the-nose metaphor for war and consumerism, but it works because it's a comedy. And Head really surprised me. This was one of my favorite movies that I've watched like in the past couple of years. I haven't laughed so much watching a movie. I would just say the only thing that I would warn you against is they actually show real execution footage from Vietnam in this, and it happens pretty early on. So if you see a bunch of people like screaming and crying because look, it's the Monkees, they're on stage, just know at the end of that sequence you're gonna see someone getting executed. So that's your fair warning. All right. Now, number 13 on my list is Blood Simple, the very first film directed by the Coen brothers. Now, watching this, you could kind of see the trajectory of where the Coen brothers are going to end up. It's not a comedy. There are funny scenes in it, but it is edited like one. They're really good at timing. You could also tell that they're inspired by their friend Sam Raimi, because there's a lot of Evil Dead shots in this movie. I've caught it immediately in my first watch. Actually, in the theatrical trailer that's in here, which is actually more of a concept piece to get money, Bruce Campbell stars in it, but he's nowhere to be found in the movie itself. The movie's about Frances McDormand leaving her mob boss-esque ex-boyfriend for another guy, and he gets jealous, so he puts out a hit on them, but it doesn't go as planned, and there's misunderstandings, and there's crime scenes, and it's really farcical. I'm describing it like it's a comedy, and again, it's funny in parts, but it's not really a comedy. It's hard to explain, but I don't want to over-explain it because I want you to see it for yourself. It's really awesome. I also reserve the right to make full-on reviews of any of these movies in the future. That's why I'm not going super in-depth about a lot of them, because maybe I can make a big video about a few of them one day, and Blood Simple kind of fits perfectly into that. I might do a Coen Brothers retrospective sometime in the future. With that said, number 12 is another movie that I saw in cinemas, which was Godzilla Minus One. This movie rocks. Not just because Godzilla's going around, he's rampaging, and it might be the best atomic breath that he's ever used in a movie. I loved watching his dorsal fins pop out before he uses it and he has to charge it up. It's so fucking awesome. But this might be the first Godzilla movie since 1954 where you care about the human characters. The movie is about survivor's guilt and the horrors of war, which is sadly missing from a lot of recent Godzilla movies, especially the American ones. And this movie kind of brings it back home, and it uses a lot of the same themes, literally when it comes to music, but it's completely new and original in the way that it's telling its story. It's derivative to the original, but I wouldn't even say it's derivative. It's paying homage to it while telling a new, fresh story about, again, survivor's guilt, the horrors of war, found family, and everybody banding together to face a common threat. It is a great movie, and I know that I'm overhyping it. It is a Godzilla movie after all, but remember, Godzilla used to be like a prestige thing. It didn't always used to just be like giant monsters fighting schlock. It was like, it was an anti-war movie, and that's again exactly what this is. And I encourage everybody to go see it if you haven't already. Even if you don't know anything about Godzilla, you don't need to know anything about Godzilla to like this movie. I saw it with a few people. It was their first Godzilla movie, and we all had a great time, and I think that you will too. Now at number 11, I have Before Midnight, which is the final installment in Richard Linklater's Before trilogy. I want to get this out of the way right off the bat. This is a perfect movie. I don't hate this movie at all. It is so great. I love Ethan Hawke. I love Julie Delpy. I love the monologues that they have across all three of the movies. The only reason this one is just a little bit lower than the other two is because of the way that it made me feel. And I know that's the point. You're not supposed to have that same feeling about the couple every 9 years when they would make these movies. They're supposed to grow and evolve like real people. And that does shine through here, and there's not a flaw in that. I just don't like how it made me feel because I got really invested in their romance and I got really invested in their relationship. These two fictional people, I got more invested than any real romance that I've ever seen in my real life, which is really sad. But if you've seen the Before trilogy, I think you know what I mean. At number 10, I have Martin Scorsese's After Hours. I loved this movie. This movie was hard to find for a really long time as far as I know. And then when it came to Criterion, I remember that being like a really big deal. And this was one of the ones that I got during Criterion month, like right when it came out. I was really excited to see it. I like Griffin Dunn. I saw American Werewolf in London, which stars him. And I was kind of excited to watch it just because I really like Martin Scorsese, but I didn't know what I was going to get. From what I understood, it was a comedy. And I love The Wolf of Wall Street. And I know that Scorsese's good at comedic scenes, but man, this makes me wish he did more comedies. And kind of like Blood Simple, it has that anxiety building up, but it's like anxiety in like a sitcom way, but that makes it sound cheaper than it actually is. It's like he keeps getting into these situations and he keeps getting deeper and deeper and things keep getting worse and worse for him. And you feel bad, but as the movie goes along, it just becomes so ridiculous and so funny that you can't help but to just laugh at this poor guy's misadventure. And the movie does a good job at making you feel like you're going on this wacky, uncontrollable adventure at like 3 a.m. I highly recommend this. And it has a cameo from Cheech and Chong in it, so there's your callback. At number 9, this is actually a rewatch. I've seen this movie numerous times, but I didn't see it on 4K until recently, and that's John Woo's Face Off, starring John Travolta and Nicolas Cage. This movie is bonkers. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but it does when you're watching the movie. It's so weird. If for whatever reason you're one of the 2 people on planet Earth that hasn't seen Face Off, it's literally what it sounds like. These two switch faces. He's a criminal, he's a good guy, and they swap places. It's insane. It's got one of the best freak out Nicolas Cage performances in it. John Travolta is actually pretty good in it. If you're only familiar with him from movies like Gotti or The Fanatic, watch this. He's really good. He makes like that weird face touching thing that John Woo does in the movie seem like normal. Well, that's not true, but he delivers a good performance. At number 8, this is also another rewatch, but I watched Stuart Gordon's From Beyond. I saw this at the New Bev a couple of weeks ago. It was my first movie that I ever saw at the New Bev. This movie's awesome. It's the same creative team and some of the same actors from Stuart Gordon's previous film, Reanimator, which is also an H.P. Lovecraft adaptation. But this one, the original H.P. Lovecraft story is only the prologue of the movie, and then the rest of it is its own original story, and that's where all the great stuff is. This is such an awesome movie if you like goopy gore effects and weird 80s horniness. Let me see if I can describe this. There's a guy who builds a machine that stimulates the pineal gland in your brain, which if that's stimulated, you could see another dimension. And this other dimension is what my friend Tabor calls the horny dimension. And this entire movie, the goopy guy is in the horny dimension. He's like, come to the horny dimension. And they're like, no, we don't want to be horny. That's exactly how my friend Tabor describes it. But that's kind of exactly what this movie is. And if that sells you on it, then great minds think alike, I guess. At number 7, another rewatch that I did was 1954's Godzilla. Now, I'm not entirely sure why I rewatched it. It wasn't because I was going to watch Minus One in a couple of weeks. I was just up late one night, I was writing, and I saw on my TV that it was recommended, and I was like, fuck it, I'll watch Godzilla. And it gets better every time that I see it. I love the human characters. I love how cute Godzilla's like introduction is. I don't know how else to describe it. It's kind of adorable. And I love that the movie actually has something to say. It was made in 1954. We were only about 10 or so years after World War II, especially in Japan, where they were still dealing with the fallout of the bomb. And that's kind of what this movie's about, because it's about a nuclear monster who comes and he's unstoppable. If you've only seen the American Godzillas, this one might seem a little bit tame to you, but give it a chance. I think you'll really be glad that you did. At number 6, I have Dr. Strangelove, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb. Yes, that's the actual title. This is one of those movies that I thought I had seen just through osmosis and bits and pieces that I saw on YouTube. I really wish I watched this earlier than I did, because this became one of my favorite movies of all time. It made me realize how much I loved Peter Sellers. I had only seen him in the Pink Panther movies, but he plays 3 characters in this. I knew he played 2. It took me until after I watched the movie to realize that he played the president, which looking back, I'm like, oh yeah, that definitely was Peter Sellers, and Matt Ammar is a stupid fuck. But it's not just Peter Sellers. I love George C. Scott in this, and there's a lot of characters that are based off of the George C. Scott character in this movie, but this is the original, and dare I say it, the best version of that character. I love the airplane, I love the war room set, and from what I understand, this is like a parody or a satire of a book that isn't a parody or a satire. I kind of love when movies do stuff like that. Like the thing that comes to mind is Starship Troopers by Paul Verhoeven. I know I didn't do this with most of the other movies on this list, except for maybe Cheech and Chong, but I love the packaging and how much care went into, like, this is an actual magazine that you see in the movie. Have you ever seen a commie drink a glass of water? And this magazine is where they house all of the essays about the movie. Like, look at this. I love when they put the effort into the goodies that you get with the movies. This might be my favorite little thing though, the little Bible that you see in the movie. You get a little replica of it. I think that's so cool. I don't know. I feel like when you get cool stuff with the packaging, it makes the whole experience of watching the movie feel a little bit more interactive, and I kind of miss that. At number 5, I have Before Sunset, Richard Linklater's second installment in his Before trilogy. Honestly, for me, Before Sunset and Before Sunrise could be interchangeable depending how I feel that day, but what I like about this one is that it subverts your expectations of where you think it's gonna go, while at the same time making it feel very real and grounded, and when you think about it, you're like, oh no, that's kind of exactly what would have happened. It takes place 9 years after the first one, which is actually in real time, so you see the same characters aged, and they talk about it, and they do the familiar monologues, but it's all new and all fresh, and it's from a different perspective because they're older. Again, I love Ethan Hawke and I love Julie Delpy, and I got really invested in their romance, and I got really invested in their characters, and it made me realize how much I loved both of them as actors, and it made me appreciate both of them as screenwriters because it feels very real and very organic, and you could tell that they actually really care about the characters they're portraying. It's not just a paycheck for them. And to tell you the truth, I was a little bit worried watching Richard Linklater movies because the only 2 that I had seen beforehand were School of Rock, which I love, and Boyhood, which I hated. Well, I guess I saw Bernie, and I thought Bernie was pretty good too, so I was like, oh no, am I gonna get a Boyhood type movie, or am I gonna get a School of Rock type movie? And I guess this is more like Boyhood, but I adored this, unlike how I felt about Boyhood. Did you know Boyhood took 12 years to make? That's all it has going for it. And in case you couldn't guess, at number 4, I have Before Sunrise. I think I like this one more than Before Sunset. At least I do right now, because I am just a sucker for meet cute romance movies. But what makes this one feel different is that it feels organic and real. And what's funny is it's neither organic or real, because they took months of setting up the scenes and making sure that they can get all in one take, and it all paid off because it does feel like they did it once, and it feels very authentic. This was Richard Linklater's follow-up to Dazed and Confused, which I still haven't seen. I'm probably going to watch it this month. But what he said he wanted to do was to make a movie unlike Dazed and Confused, which is very male-centric, and make something that appealed to both sexes. And I think he succeeded. I have no way of knowing because I'm only one, but I think he succeeded because I could see everybody just really falling in love like I did with the characters of Jesse and Celine. I love these 2. I'm so invested. I know they shouldn't make a 4th one because I don't want them to ruin it, but I do want to know how they're doing. I know they're not real, goddammit. All right, we're down to the top 3. And at number 3, I have The Last Picture Show by Peter Bogdanovich. This movie is heartbreaking, beautiful. It has a reverence for old Hollywood, unlike the other BBS movies, which, yes, this is the 4K version. I do have the BBS version. Where is it? It's over there. This is easily the best movie in the BBS lineup, and it made me think, do I even need the BBS box set anymore? Because the only ones that I would want would be Easy Rider and The Last Picture Show, which have individual releases. But then I remembered that Head is in there, and it's the only way you can get it without paying $200 on a Monkeys box set, so I'm like, I'll keep the BBS box set. This is the 4K edition, and it comes with the sequel, which I have not watched yet, but I'm really excited to do so because I loved this movie. It was sad, it was happy, it was heartbreaking, it was like, it made you feel like you were trapped in this little town with everyone, but some people were complacent, some people wish that they went off to do greater things, some people have ambitions, some people just want to fall in love, and it's so human, and that's what I really loved about this movie. And I would recommend, even if you just can find the box set that has The Last Picture Show in it, I would highly recommend it. Bye, Maya. Oh, hi, buddy. Hi, Misty. Everybody, I hope you remember my cat, the magical Mr. Mistopheles, who's now taken Maya's place on the couch. Hey, buddy. All right, for number 2, this is my final rewatch, which is Paul Thomas Anderson's Punch Drunk Love, starring Adam Sandler. Now, if you don't know anything about this movie and you hear, what, an Adam Sandler movie is number 2? This isn't really an Adam Sandler movie. This is on the same caliber as something like Uncut Gems or the Merowitz Stories. This is a movie that has Adam Sandler in it, but he wasn't creatively involved, and he is incredible in this. He's almost like a Charlie Chaplin, Buster Keaton type character. He's actually more of like a Adam Sandler character if he was plucked from one of his movies and put into reality, which means his anger-induced tirades are more sad and human, and you kind of see how broken a person like that would actually be if they really existed. And I really love the romance that he has with Emily Watson. It's so nice, and you could tell there's something a little bit off about her too. And I really like that the movie uses love almost like a superpower. Like, he has all this bottled up anger, bottled up rage because his 7 sisters are just so abusive and verbally like mean to him, and when he finally feels love, he can accomplish anything. And I really appreciate that about the movie. I like Paul Thomas Anderson movies. I hated Licorice Pizza because I didn't like the weird age gap that they had in the movie, but this was so good. I revisit this at least once a year, and I'm going to continue to revisit it. I actually saw this as a double feature with the Wong Kar-wai film In the Mood for Love at the New Bev, and what a double feature. And when I say that this movie I prefer to the Wong Kar-wai movie, that means something. This is such a good movie, and if you haven't seen it and you only know Adam Sandler from like Little Nicky or Jack and Jill, please watch this movie. It came out the same year as 8 Crazy Nights, which is really depressing when you think about it. And for my number 1, my favorite film that I watched in January that I had never seen up to this point was Milos Forman's One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, starring Jack Nicholson. I didn't mean to do this, but I kind of went on a Jack Nicholson binge. It really happened because of the BBS movies, and I kind of thought about watching this movie outside of it, but I'm really glad that I did. It's from an era where you have kind of an unlikable protagonist that you grow to like more as the movie goes on, because even though he's like a bad person, he's like an evil person. You watch him grow and change and become better and really become a symbol of hope for everybody who's at this asylum, and you really grow to hate Nurse Ratched. Nurse Ratched, I understand why everybody hates Nurse Ratched now. I hate this bitch, especially how she treats Billy Bibbit, Brad Dourif's character, who also, Brad Dourif is so good. He steals this movie. If you know Brad Dourif as Chucky, like, and he's great as Chucky, don't get me wrong, but like, I think he's an incredibly underrated actor. We're talking about George C. Scott earlier, who's in The Exorcist 3. Brad Dourif is also in The Exorcist 3, and he is so good in that. He's great in David Lynch's Dune. He's great in Blue Velvet. He's great as Wormtongue in Lord of the Rings, but like, he's heartbreaking as Billy Bibbit. Christopher Lloyd's in this movie too, and when I was watching this movie, I remember thinking to myself, damn, that guy looks just like Christopher Lloyd. It's really distracting. Then I found out it was Christopher Lloyd, and I felt like a real idiot. And Danny DeVito's in this, and he's playing a character that I haven't really seen him play before. He's playing somebody kind of like this childlike, very simple person. And I'm used to him as like Frank Reynolds or the Penguin or like the dad from Matilda. But in this, he's really like warm and simple, and I loved watching him. He's got like this big goofy smile, and he worked with Milos Forman again when he made Man on the Moon, that weird Jim Carrey movie that I like, but I also dislike because of all the shit that Jim Carrey did behind the scenes, but that's beside the point. If you haven't seen One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, please watch One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. It's so great, and I don't really want to spoil anything else. I really think that you should seek this out. I don't know how widely available this version is. This has like a little book, and it's funny because this is from, I want to say 2009 or 2010, so it's an older Blu-ray, but when you go to Danny DeVito's page, it mentions he's starring on the show It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, which means like, damn, you know, that show's like 20 years old now, or it will be next year. That's insane to think about. And that's everything that I watched in January 2024. I watched 25 films that I have never seen, and I watched 4 films that I have seen. And part of the reason I'm making this video is to hold myself accountable and try to reach that 365 film goal. And if you'd like to join me on my journey, I'll leave my Letterboxd linked below. Usually when I'm done watching a movie, I'll put a little rating and a few quick thoughts about it. And if you're new here, consider liking and subscribing. That would mean a lot to me. And for those of you who stuck around until the end, thank you so much for hanging out. Billy's over here playing with his toy. I don't know if it's picking that up. And for a few little updates, I'm working on a review of Pee-wee's Big Adventure, and I have more sketches coming soon, so watch out for those. I hope this was at least halfway enjoyable. I have no idea how this video is going to turn out, so I guess I better turn off the camera, start editing, and see if there's anything usable here. So I'll see y'all later. Bye. Say bye, Maya. Bye-bye. Special thanks to Mrs. Froggy, Big Drippy, Rukix, Robith, Straight Queer, Catherine Escobar, and Charizard for supporting me on Patreon. And thank you for making it to the end of the video.